Hi everyone, I'm Ashley and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am going to show you how I took this dresser and gave it a huge makeover. I am talking one of the biggest transformations that I have done to a piece of furniture to date. I used two different techniques to get such a dramatic look to this piece. The first was cutting arches in those front doors and then adding a cane webbing insert. It's a great way to add a fun texture to any piece of furniture. The second technique that I used, and I've used this before, if you've been following me, you know it's one of my go-to techniques, especially when working with solid wood, and that is taking a paint wash and then applying a stain over top of it to really get a beautiful toned piece of wood. Now, I was not intending to use this paint wash stain combo look on this dresser. I had two stains picked out to get a look that I had in mind. However, it went terribly wrong because of the type of wood that this dresser is. It's a cherry wood, and I will talk all about that in the video. So let's go ahead and get started. This is honestly one of the heaviest dressers I have ever lifted, which is why furniture dollies are a must for this project. I started by removing all of the outdated hardware. I don't plan on using it in the final design. I also take this time to fix any loose or broken drawers that might not be sliding right. Luckily, this dresser just had some screws that needed to be tightened and a couple of drawer glides that needed to be glued down. I just grab some wood glue and apply it to the bottom of the drawer runner and then clamp it down until it's dry. I then began cleaning the dresser thoroughly. Cleaning helps your sandpaper not get gunked up, requiring you to change sanding pads every few minutes. I hate cleaning, but it definitely saves money and time in the long run. If you want to know any of the products that I'm using throughout the video, I have them all listed out below in the details. So it's important when you're removing dresser drawers to label them and what slot they came out of. And the reason I do that is because I've had cases where I've completely disassembled it and then I try to rearrange the drawers back to where I thought that they go and they wouldn't fit. It's a little bit of time consuming pain. Whoever had this dresser before me has already done so. So we don't need to do that. I then remove the doors from the hinges, making sure to label the hinges as I go. This is a pro tip that you'll thank me for later. Hinges can be a little finicky when you go to line them back up. They don't want to fit unless you have them in the exact spot that they came from. I think it's just years of wear and tear, not sure, but make sure to label them and you will be very happy in the long run. I wanted this dresser to be all natural wood, so I started by using a carbide scraper, and if you've been following me or watched some of my videos, you know that I love using this tool to start every project because it removes finish quickly, and there's not much to it. You just apply even pressure and pull back, and it scrapes off the finish without damaging the wood. However, with the top of this dresser, I found that it had a very thick lacquer topping, meaning it was taking too much work and too much effort to use the carbide scraper in this instance, so I opted to grab my orbital sander and just sand off the finish by using first an 80 grit sandpaper until all of the finish was removed. I did go through a lot more sandpaper than I would have if I were to just have used the carbide scraper and then sandpaper. However, it took much less effort, so I was willing to use that sandpaper. And I have sanded the full top down with 80 grit sandpaper. Now I am going to move on to 120 grit sandpaper. And before I do that though, I take a pencil and I mark off, kind of go in squiggly lines back and forth. Doesn't have to be perfect. The reason why I'm doing this is so that when I'm sanding, I will know which spots I have sanded and have not sanded. This will help me get a nice even sand. So I'm getting ready to sand the edges of the dresser. And as you know, if you've done any type of sanding work before, edges can be painful because a lot of times you have to hand sand them. However, I have a Surf Prep sander and look how dirty it is. This is how much I use it. And they sell foam pads, and these foam pads are designed to go around those curved edges so that it sands for you. The dental molding on the front of the dresser concerned me because I knew I could not get into each of those crevices. However, I decided not to sand that. I just went in with a wire brush and scrubbed in between those after I was done sanding and left it at that and left the original finish. Now, this was a personal preference. I just did not think it was worth my time trying to get into those crevices, and you'll see in the final result that it actually looks nice because it brings in some depth to the piece. I followed the same grit order of the sandpaper to sand the rest of the dresser. I used 80, then 120, then 180. I did actually not use 220 on this. I thought 180 made it as smooth as I needed it. I use my DeWalt orbital sander to really be that power horse of a sander and get through that finish easier. And then I use my Surf Prep sander for all of those details around the drawers and those curved edges in any small space really. Links to both of those sanders are in the captions below. I made it sanding through everything except the base, and the reason why I left that for last was because I did not like that detail around the bottom piece. So I wanted to keep the legs, but I wanted to trim off that ornate curvature that just kind of dated the piece in my opinion. So I went through and marked where I wanted to cut it with a level so it was a nice straight edge, and then grabbed my jigsaw and made that cut. After I cut it off, I used my orbital sander and smoothed out the edges and continued to sand that base until it was a natural wood as well. And for all those areas that I could not use my orbital sander or even my detail Surf Prep sander, I just had to hand sand, and that is what took the longest time. I folded up a sheet of sandpaper and just hand sanded until all of the finish was removed. This video makes it look like it went by fast, but in actuality, I spent about 6 to 7 hours sanding this entire dresser. So I'm now moving on to the doors of the dresser. And the doors are just those double doors that open up to another drawer and some extra space down below. And in these doors, I'm going to do a cane insert, but I'm going to do a technique that I've never done before, and that is an arch. When I've done these in the past, I've just cut out a rectangle here because you have to get a blank space so that you can put the cane insert in. And I'd like to do a more modern arch up here. So I have my safety goggles on and I'm ready to start cutting. I didn't have a compass laying around, so I just grabbed something circular that would fit into the space that I needed, and an old broken ring light did the trick. I traced it from end to end to know where to make my cut. To make the initial cut in the door, I use my Dremel oscillating tool. This is a great tool to have when working on furniture. There are so many different attachments, but here I am just using the blade that cuts through wood and cutting out enough room so that my jigsaw blade can fit. It's not as powerful as my jigsaw, which is why I chose not to use the Dremel for cutting out the full piece. After most of the center was removed, I had to clean up the arch. This was probably the hardest part of the whole project just because cutting a circular shape is kind of challenging, especially when it's a hard, thick wood like cherry. I wanted a nice seamless design around the edges of the arch and what I had just cut out. So I grabbed my router, and when I first got this tool, I was actually really scared to try it, but it is so easy to use. I highly encourage you getting one if it's something that you're interested in. It really helps you clean up those straight edge lines and get that nice rounded look. If you want to see all the details of how to use a router, let me know. Leave a comment below because I would be happy to show you how I use it. I'm not an expert, so it would be coming from a novice, but it might be helpful, and I'd love to know if it would be helpful to you. After I finished routing the edges, I grabbed my sander and sanded off the remaining finish from both of the doors. I grabbed a piece of 1/4 inch plywood to use as the insert for the doors. I wanted to use a piece of plywood to attach the cane onto before applying them back onto the doors because I didn't want to see through the cane. To get the right size of plywood that I needed, I just traced the arch of the door and then went around and added 1 inch overlay so that I would have enough room to attach that insert onto on the back. You'll see more about what I'm talking about in the next few minutes here. I clamped the wood to my work table and made the cut with my jigsaw. When cutting plywood, sometimes it'll leave a jagged edge if you don't use the right type of blade, or you can use tape. Sometimes I will use painter's tape, lay it down, and then make the cut on that tape, and it will prevent the wood from splintering like it did. Instead, I just used some sandpaper, sanded it down till it was nice and smooth, and then I did actually go back and put a little bit of wood filler into those deep areas wherever they were. After the backing was done, I moved on to the cane. Cane comes in a very stiff form, and to make it easier to work with, I like to soak it in water for about 20 minutes, and this will make it a little more flexible and actually just flat so that you can cut it evenly. After it's soaked for about 20 minutes, I take it out of the water and then lie it on a towel just so that it does dry flat. I then line it up to the plywood size and make the cut just using scissors. It's super easy to cut. To attach the cane to the plywood, I used a fabric spray. The spray dries clear, so I sprayed a thick coat to ensure that the cane would stick to the plywood surface. I grabbed a variety of books just to help that cane dry flat on the surface, and I let it sit there for about an hour. While the cane dried, I grabbed some mineral spirits and wiped down the dresser to clean off any dust. This also helps me see how the wood will look when it is stained. Softwoods like pine will stain unevenly, showing darker spots, which I call blotchy. I don't like that look, so I was going to do everything to avoid it. But you can tell that this wood was very blotchy, lots of dark spots scattered throughout there. So to help it stain evenly and avoid that blotchiness, I used a thing called pre-stain conditioner, and this is just a step that you take before staining to get a nice even stain, hopefully removing that blotchiness. I had no idea what type of wood this was until I reached out to my Instagram followers and they identified it as cherry. I hadn't ever stained cherry before, so this was going to be a big learning experience for me, as you will find out. I grabbed some stain in the color weathered oak to tone down the redness, and then I was going to use early American to bring some warmth back into it. However, if you saw on the can, you saw that this type of stain is penetrating, which means it goes deep into the grain. That is not the stain that you want to use if your wood is blotchy. As you can tell, it really highlighted all of those dark areas on my surface. Instead, there are water-based options or gel-based stains that aren't penetrating and will not cause that wood to have those dark spots. So unfortunately, I hated it and had to re-sand everything. This is where I really messed up, and if I were to do it over again, I would have definitely only practiced on the top instead of doing the entire dresser because it added so much time to my project. But I'm not gonna bore you with more sanding videos, so let's just skip to the good part. After it was all sanded again, I decided to do a paint wash. Paint washes are a fantastic option because there are zero blotchiness and you can still see the grain. So I grabbed some beige paint and added 50% paint and 50% water. I grab a tack cloth and remove any dust from my furniture before using a foam brush to apply the paint wash. And I have to work pretty quickly here because the paint wash will dry quickly and I still want to be able to see that grain underneath of it. And a paint wash is just like a stain, so I grab a lint-free cloth and wipe back the excess. And here's a quick side-by-side comparison of with the beige wash on the left and without it on the right. You can see how much it tones down that red. Follow the same process on the rest of the dresser, just applying that paint wash with the foam brush and then wiping it back, doing it in small sections so it wouldn't dry fast on me. And if you're liking this video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you can get all of the updates on my future furniture makeover videos. I let the whitewash dry for about an hour and a half until I looked at it again, and it was just too light for me. I needed to bring back some warmth for the vision that I was going for this piece of furniture. So I opted to grab some water-based stain from Minwax in the color Provincial and mixed it up with some water because it is very thick stuff. I followed the same process to apply the water-based stain that I did with the paint wash. However, first I used a 320 grit sandpaper over a sanding block and just knocked back any of those raised grain that was caused by the paint wash. Sometimes when you add water to wood, it will raise the grain, and I want it nice and smooth. I used my water mister to mist the surface before applying the water-based stain. This just helps me give a little more time to work with the stain because it does dry pretty quickly because it's water-based. After the stain dried, I grabbed my door and the cane insert and attached it to the door using my brad nailer. I just went around the edge and applied some of the 18 gauge brad nails. After it was attached, I followed the same stain and whitewash combo on the plywood as I did with the rest of the dresser. I then grabbed my drawers and added some fun drawer liners. I just use peel and stick wallpaper. It's so easy to apply and remove in the future if anyone wants to change it up. I love adding drawer liners because it brings a pop of color to a piece, especially if you're doing natural wood. And people who buy the furniture really, really love to find that little extra benefit whenever they open up the drawers. I also apply Howard's Feed and Wax on the drawers. This just freshens up the wood and makes it smell good. And I'll flip it over and put it on the drawer runners too and make it glide better. It was time to finally seal the dresser. I love using Minwax's water-based polyurethane with my Home Right sprayer. Both of them are linked below. It's a great combination and it goes on so smoothly. And just a quick reminder of where we started with this makeover. This dresser was huge and dark and just outdated to where it is now. It is beautiful, light, and modern, and honestly, I can't even tell it was the same dresser. The sheen from the satin top coat is my absolute favorite, and the tone of the wood that the paint wash and stain gave was the exact color I was going for. That almost never happened, so I was so excited with this final result. The cane adds a bit more of that boho feel to the dresser, and the new black hardware adds that perfect touch. Let me know what you think in the comments and if you would have done anything differently. I love hearing your guys' feedback and different design ideas. And thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this makeover.